Hi everyone, thank you for being here with us today and thank you for preferring listening to us than going to the drinks. My name is Lou and I look after our FSI strategy together with AWS and I'm from Intel. You're probably wondering, what is Intel doing with AWS? Well, cloud doesn't run on thin air and we've been working together with AWS for the past 18 years to design the best instances and services for compute-heavy workloads. And we help customers and partners like yourself to go through your migration successfully. We do that by offering technical optimization support to help you squeeze all the juice out of our instances and services on AWS. Now, why are we here today? Well, all easy to migrate application have now been migrated to the cloud. And we have customers and ISVs that are faced with applications that are critical to business operation and challenging to migrate and modernize. And the banking and capital markets, I'm sure you're aware of this, out of all of the industries have been gifted with many of those. And so we have today a range of experts from our panel. They have specific views on how their clients are tackling these challenges. And we're here today to discuss the latest drivers and opportunities. So let me introduce you to our range of experts today. There is no cloud without AWS. So Charith, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Just a real quick introduction. I lead our banking industry team globally for AWS. What that means is I work with financial service customers to help them transform using the cloud.
Lovely. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lewis Poe. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of a company called Caspian One Open Data. I'm here in strategic partnership with DXC and the wider partners of AWS and Intel. I'm going to do the view on two things. One of them is we run our products cloud natively and how that all works, but also some feedback from the global industry around digital transformation and what we've seen for cloud migrations as well.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jared Parker. I'm with DXC Luxoft. I'm a product delivery manager. I work with Early Resolution, which is a software system that we've recently migrated to the cloud, and we'll be providing some insight in how that all happened for our clients.
Hi, my name is Hugh Richards. I work for DXC Technology. Who are they? Many of you, if you're banking customers, are probably one of our over 400 banking customers worldwide. We're a system integrator. Amongst all the other verticals that exist, as Lou was alluding to, we're here representing banking and capital markets today. My role is one of strategic transformation. My title, I think probably if you're looking it up, is ecosystem change. And that really covers many manner of sins, from strategic transformation, expert transition, innovative development, and working with ISV partners and partners such as Intel and AWS in helping customers move those really hard to move systems. And we're here in part, among many other sort of topics, to talk about Early Resolution. Luxoft, which owns Early Resolution, is a subsidiary of DXC. So it's Luxoft, a DXC company. And we also have partnerships with Caspian One as well as AWS. So with that, back to you.
Thank you. So let's get started. Let's start by setting up the scene a little bit. So could you please share with us what are the key business trends you're seeing in the banking and capital market in parallel to how cloud has transformed the technology landscape?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, let me start. Look, I think anyone here who's been in banking or financial services, I think it's fair to say, yeah, we're seeing an overarching move towards digitization, whether that's consumers, retail, small business, commercial banking. We're seeing things become much more personalized. So how do we actually get to an N=1 for a customer? And really what consumers and retail banks are doing, and what we're seeing in small business and corporate, is how do I get faster decision, remove the friction from the process, and eliminate fraud. Now, the eliminate fraud is a really interesting aspect, because as you think about, as we get more digitized, what we're seeing is more and more bad actors being able to penetrate or trying to penetrate through fraud, whether that's man-in-the-middle attacks, whether that's account takeover, or with the cyber event and issuing ransomware. So we see these factors really pushing on financial service institutions to transform. So that's the consumer side of it, really driving better outcomes, less friction, and then the bad actors driving better protection. Now, from a cloud point of view, it's pretty straightforward. We see customers using the cloud because they're able to move faster, they're able to access better technology, and they're able to use the machine learning and the technology that's been developed by AWS and our partners to help prevent fraud. And we see those things coalescing in terms of driving the modernization and the digitization of banking and financial services.
Thank you. Hugh, would you mind sharing your experience from a system integrator standpoint?
What if I said no? Okay, so I'm going to give some background before the actual sort of drivers as it relates to technology and cloud. Any CIO of any large bank have three basic drivers. The first is to save cost. Second is to reduce complexity of their business environment, and then getting closer to clients. Those are the hallmark. You ask any CIO, any day of the week, any year over the last decade, or probably in the next decade, those are the challenges that they're facing. But there's several challenges that are actually sort of driving all of that. Digital transformation urgency, needing to move to, and when my colleague here on the right, Lewis, blank there for a moment, please, jet lag, starts talking about open banking regulations in the US notably affecting the better part of 3,000 banks is causing a whirlwind of drivers and challenges. Banks aren't necessarily ready for that. And so there's some very big sort of elements that are impeding CIOs to achieve their overall agenda. Perennial new regulation and change against old systems are causing massive costs to suddenly skyrocket, especially with the people who know those systems either retiring or moving to new organizations. And then they're lacking transition expertise because many banks are trying to achieve those hurdles of reducing complexity and cost, but they're actually tripping over themselves because the transitions are happening at the same time as regulations are hitting to the same people who are both running the systems and having to change the systems. And so there's a lot of change on that front. Now, when we take a look at and I think Lou alluded to it just a little bit earlier, when you take a look at the hurdle of new and old systems, many of the old systems, the easy ones, have already been migrated. And now we're getting to a point where the older systems that are critical systems are having to be migrated to the cloud for cost reasons and for simplicity. But that creates an issue with the old systems that actually have a lot of customized functionality and operational dependencies for the people who are running the business who are using those systems. And when the IT team goes, well, we need to move those systems to the cloud or upgrade or migrate those, some functionalities are going to have to be jettisoned. So we now hit the bottom of the road where big operational change is going to have to happen as we start collapsing systems or moving systems together. And that's one of the big sort of challenges that we're facing, which is at odds with some of the technologies that we're probably here discussing at AWS reInvent, which is adopt AI, big data, shift to consolidated data frontiers, holistic views of data and acting on those decision-making, et cetera, et cetera. Those big data shifts are actually at odds with upgrading some of those older systems, because if you move the older systems, you break some of the operational dependencies of which the data patterns are involved on, and so on and so forth. So we've got this dilemma, this cyclical dilemma that's actually affecting a lot of banks, holding up the CIOs from being able to achieve their main goals. So what does that really mean? We're needing balanced change. I've attended a couple of conferences, or in fact, I've done your role at several conferences recently, where AI in face of the regulators don't necessarily know yet how to properly hold banks and other institutions to AI guardrails. So they're in a consultation effort. Derived IP, customer data protection, derived IP ownership, all these things that are being looked at both from a regulatory point of view, safeguards, legal, and end customer protections. And all those kind of roll in. So when we take a look at what everybody wants, they want safe, scalable markets. So we have to be very careful when we think about the change that's going on and the technologies that we're adopting. So it's all exciting. I love AI in all its fashions, generative AI, machine learning, and sort of robotics. But at what cost and what change? Now, when we last point on all of this, the drivers from the technology point of view, AI data insights, I'm just reading off my list and I apologize, identifying what is truly differentiating within your organization versus what can be commoditized. And therein lies, I think, the root question that's probably going to be driving through anyone who's adopting new technology in the banks specifically, retail and consumer, defense industry, et cetera, treasury, and all those areas probably are a little bit simpler. But when you take a look at the mammoth amount of clients that are involved in any change and the impact in downstream, it's actually key. So what's differentiating? What's commoditized? And when we take a look at the new regulations and the cost of updating the old systems, and then identifying new functionalities, then we're ready to be able to take a look at, oh, we'll put AI in for this. We'll do a big data solution for that. We'll migrate that, but more importantly, the other side of the coin is we will jettison this. We will forego that because it's not cost driving for us anymore, whereas we thought it was critical functionality. Sorry, very long answer to the question, but it's important to set the scene because we're going to be touching on lots of different aspects of that in today's panel.
Talking about regulation, Lewis, Caspian One is helping, shape the open banking world. So, what are the business trends?
Yeah, so obviously there's a major global movement that's been going on, which is, it's called this term open banking. Now, nearly every G7 country globally has actually adopted regulatory-driven the open banking model. And this is all about sharing customer data securely and digitally. So these regulations have just been announced in the US. And one of the key lessons that we've seen from nearly every tier of financial institution is that actually leveraging cloud has been the fundamental enabler. You're now suddenly moving into a space where you need to be putting in place against fairly aggressive regulatory timelines, highly scalable, very secure APIs, very low latency, real-time information being published. Having that ability with cloud to really automate that, the fault tolerance and scalability, nearly every financial institution globally has fed back it's their number one in all of the strategic changes they needed to make to leverage all the cloud-native technology to really to enable this. This change has just been announced in the US a few weeks ago by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and it's going to be a big theme today, so we'll go into a bit further in a bit.
So a few of the things that we've really seen in the market from a banking capital marketing trend perspective is, especially with financial institutions, is they're looking to automate a lot of their processes. A lot of the processes that they have today are very manual. And that opens up to a lot of risk. It opens up to a lot of time spent checking and rechecking. And so moving to the cloud or getting some kind of digital transformation or even using AI technology is critical there because it streamlines the process. It reduces the risk. I think Lou mentioned, you're using more secure APIs, things that are going to be more sustainable moving forward than these manual processes. And it becomes very challenging, specifically in a regulatory environment where there's consistent auditing and checking going on, specifically in the financial services arena, to trying to maintain a high level of auditing capabilities that are going to be accurate when you're in a manual environment working through manual processes consistently. So that change to moving to more digital transformation is going to be critical moving forward.
Thank you. We have together identified, sorry, do you want to jump in?
No.
Okay. So we have together identified multiple key technology-related market trends that are shaping the banking and capital market today, from hyper-personalization needs to the increased security pressure, from the increased computational requirement coming with the new regulation and open banking as well, to the rise of AI as a potential key differentiator. If we shift gear a little bit, Hugh, based on your experience, what would you say are the biggest challenges the industry is facing?
Yeah, with my long opening, I think I alluded to many of them. Let me just summarize. Right. Technical debt. Technical debt is the silent CIO's nightmare. And that is actually sort of massive. That is a precursor to being able to justify ROI projects in terms of moving to the cloud, right? The cultural mindset is key to embody both that first point and what will be my next point after this. The cultural mindset is key. The end-to-end scope of the ROI is critical. A lot of people think, well, I can move something to the cloud. I can buy a service already on the cloud, but to move my system to the cloud involves several things. It involves the parallel running of the old system and the new system, the provisioning of the software into environments into the cloud. These are all basic one-on-one items I'm sure we all know, but Will the old ISV system, ISV, an independent software vendor, software supplier system that the bank's been critically running on for the last 10, 15, 20 years, is it even ready and certified to run in AWS? And will it have to forego certain functionalities? So the whole end-to-end of running the system and getting it moved over and actually duplicating staff to be able to run the new along with the old without actually having the staff quit because they're overworked are all considerations that need to be put into the ROI sort of return on investment business plan that many people lose sight of. And so they're getting halfway into executing a multi-year project, and guess what? Staff changes, in which case someone else is either killing the project or actually adopting it, not knowing. So there's a cultural mindset that's really key to take a look at in terms of how long the ROI, return on investment, is going to happen having moved to the cloud. Fear of the unknown is a variation of what I just mentioned. A lot of people don't know how to move to the cloud. You've got career staff who are excellent at running systems for the business who are going to have to transition themselves and move to this new mindset. They might not make that leap and that journey. And are we going to be dependent on external consulting for the rest of our lives? It's a big consideration, and the fear of the unknown is massive. By the way, I'm foreshadowing the support that we got from AWS and Intel, which helped take out a lot of that fear of the unknown. So if you're wondering where I was going. The key is we need to be able to leverage partners to help us identify what's commoditizable. What do I mean by that? When you take a look at what is commoditized and routine and not competitive, get a third-party product for it. Don't keep maintaining it and managing it. And for what's not commoditizable, then you go for shopping and going, wait a second, is there something innovative out there that actually can help do what I do at scale? So if you're making $100 on every activity versus some activities you're making $1,000 on, well, how do I scale up those $1,000 opportunities and scale? That's where the innovative technology comes. And so when we look at that in terms of the challenges, technical debt, cultural mindset, fear of the unknown, partners, key here with partners for identifying commoditized innovation, it's key to work with partners. It's key to be able to take a step down and go, right, as we did, we worked with Intel. This is not meant to be a sales engagement, but it's an example of we took our utility, which Jared's going to be talking about in a few moments' time, and worked with the specialists from AWS and Intel and others to be able to make our migration seamless. And it stopped us having to school up lots of staff and try and figure those out the hard way. We no longer live in a time where you do things hard way and you've got an opportunity to learn. People get fired over that. So why don't we actually, embrace the innovation that's available and the expertise?
Thank you, Hugh. Charis, you've worked with many customers across the industry. What are the top challenges that keep coming back?
Yeah, I mean, like Hugh said, I think, when you think about change, it's hard, yeah. And when we think about change in the financial services industry as a whole, one of the challenges that we've always had is we've talked about release cycles in quarters or 6 months or yearly release cycles. And that's been a big change, both from how do I experiment, so how do I release code quickly, and how do I use the tools? Clearly the mic doesn't like me. How do I use the tools so that I can actually be able to release code fast, okay? So that inability to experiment. Oh, yeah, cool. All right, so I guess my mic's broken. So as I was saying, so the inability to experiment and the size of change and release cycles actually slowed down experimentation so that we could move fast enough. And that's been a big blocker, and what we've seen is the cloud actually remove that. So, moving to the cloud poses, a set of migrations, but once there, the ability to execute fast. The second thing is really looking at from front to back point of view, okay? Being able to end-to-end automate something or update something so that you can actually deliver value for your customers. So think something like loan operations, time to yes. Okay, that touches the CRM, the website, the credit decisioning engine, the loan operations management, etc. Being able to do that in an end-to-end process, so you're able to not just impact applications, but do end-to-end value chain. That's always been a challenge in financial services because we've thought of things as applications. I've got a CRM, I've got a LOS, I've got a decisioning engine, I've got an email system, etc. But when you think about it from a consumer point of view, you're trying to help me apply for a loan and get funding. So that ability of both change and how do I do change quickly in a controlled manner as opposed to quarterly and 6 monthly release cycles, through to how do I enact change on an end-to-end process becomes key. Now that applies to everything from core banking operations to lending operations to collections like we see with ER, or through to being able to do better transaction monitoring. So those are the things that we see as the challenges when you think about why cloud's being adopted, to then remove some of those factors. And then touching back to what Hugh said, then really changing the TOC paradigm as well.
Lewis, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, so we see two real themes globally very, very consistently as well, which is around identity and security. Now, the identity one is kind of, first of all, what's the technical issues? We see many institutions don't actually understand their relationship to the customer. They very often have Lewis as Lewis 123 in retail banking, Lewis ABC in business banking, and something different in private banking, etc. And why is this a real problem? Well, okay, there's a technical issue, a lot of issues kind of like to clean up. But the key thing we're now seeing in the new digital world is the fact that the consumer in these digital marketplaces has price transparency. All of a sudden, they can shop around, they can buy products from everywhere. This is the idea of open banking, the new digital ecosystems. What does this mean for a financial institution? Well, it's margin compression. All of a sudden, the pricing becomes so much more competitive. So what are the kind of solutions that you need to put in place in the new digital landscape? It's understanding your customer properly. And I think Charith mentioned it earlier, it's around personalization, the feedback of reward, loyalty programs, et cetera, that we're seeing proliferate in many, many global markets. And it all comes back to really understanding that identity. And that identity also feeds into the second part, which is security. We need to really understand that authentication mechanisms, the kind of the PSD2 regulations in Europe for strong customer authentications, so that we can really understand how we're sharing that customer data, where it's going to, what the implications are. But also more technically, there are new standards that are also starting to emerge globally. It's called financial grade API. I'll touch on it more in a moment as well. And how do you actually now put all of those security controls in place in your organization to start really securely sharing customer data to the fintech communities, et cetera. And that kind of security models is the other major theme that we see. And this is how do you actually now layer on all of these new protocols, new industry standards, and leverage all the cloud native tools really to build a holistic kind of security offering overall. So they're the two big themes for us that we're seeing. Sorry. Jared.
Thank you, Lewis. So clearly the top challenges that I've heard come back several times are technical debt, culture, the need for a change of cultural mindset, need to work from customer backwards and not let our legacy infrastructure dictate how we approach end customers, as well as identity and security as a big focus area. To tackle some of the issues we have just mentioned, DXC took the bull by the horn, if I may say so, with early resolution software. So why don't we dive deep in this concrete example to bring those opportunities and challenges that we have captured so far?
Sure.
Jared, can you tell us about what is early resolution? What does it do?
Yeah, so early resolution is a SaaS system. It's now cloud-based. Obviously, we moved to AWS. But really, it's a software system that really provides a unified borrower experience in the lending space. So if you think about collections, you think about underwriting, you think about customer portals that reach out to customers to allow them to find more affordable loans and repayment plans to get back current. That's what early resolution does, and it really unifies that experience across all of that. So in loan servicing is a very regulated market, as you probably all know. Regulatory changes are occurring all the time, and so being able to make changes in the system can be very challenging with software systems, and early resolution really provides a way to do that. It's very configurable, and it provides a way for banking financial institutions to streamline their processes to make it very efficient. There are SLAs that need to be met. Obviously, there's auditing from the government as well, and so making those SLAs is very important, or there could be fines and other things as well. So going to the cloud allowed us to be able to kind of expand our product suite there, with things like AI technology, for example, and we're looking into that to be able to, like I mentioned before, streamline manual processes, things like checking documents, letters, things like that in real-time fashion. And so early resolution really is a state-of-the-art lending solution for financial services. But moving to the cloud was challenging. I wouldn't say it was easy. It was challenging, and a couple of things that that we came up against were, you know, we wanted to make sure that our technology stack associated with early resolution didn't change too much, that the architecture stayed the same. The architecture is leading in the industry and is very important in the servicing industry. So we didn't want to change that. So we were very careful there in making sure that we didn't make a lot of changes. So things like WebSphere, the WebSphere process was not changed. We kept that in the middle layer system and didn't move it to the cloud. But there were some great benefits, obviously. I think all of these people mentioned it before. There's cybersecurity benefits. There's efficiencies, processes involved that benefit us. But I think the biggest thing, the most important benefit was performance of the system. So if you think about uptimes and how things get processed, underwriting timelines, all those things, going to the cloud helped us to scale up. And so there are things like automated decisioning where you can run thousands of loans through one time. And by going to the cloud allowed us to improve that performance to be able to do that level of underwriting for many, many loans. So that was very important. There were some risks, obviously, involved that we tried to minimize. It's very important that you control, you try to move out or get rid of things that you can't control or minimize those and phase them out. And then one thing that we did with the cloud migration that was very important is we over-communicated. We worked with AWS. We made sure we over-communicated internally as well because it's a big undertaking. And so communicating, making sure we're getting the support, making sure that internal departments understand what we're doing was very critical. Operations knew what we're doing. So all of those things were very important as we moved through this cloud migration process.
Thank you, Jared. Hugh, you've worked very closely with Intel during this collaboration. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What has made it so unique?
Yeah, I will rephrase your question just a little bit and get to your point. Early resolution isn't the only solution that we've actually worked with Intel and AWS in terms of migrating. We work with a whole portfolio of we're a system integrator, par excellence, but we're a system integrator, and we work with many partner ISV products to be able to work with their end customers to help them upgrade, help them migrate, and help them move forward. And so we've been working in what we call the as a service space for quite some time. And there was one big major system that we hadn't actually migrated, which was our own. That whole, why don't you eat your own dog food sort of expression as it used to be. Actually, I haven't heard it lately, so it might be an aged expression. But we finally got to working on our own migration of our critical system. We run it, we own it, but it's a critical system for our end customers, not any dissimilar to any of our partner companies and customers, many of them who have deployed software on-prem that we've actually helped migrate, covering off on all those risks and all those ROI items. Now, it's not meant to be a sales pitch rather than just a reminder to everybody how complex the whole process is of moving a critical system. And when we take a look at the 4 work streams, which I think you alluded to, give or take, Jared, is the client coordination. We had to move a whole bunch of customers and get them accepting and doing parallel tests themselves for their own rights and responsibilities to face off to the regulators. We had environment migrations of the source code, which you alluded to the new environments that AWS and Intel helped out with amazingly. But one subtle area that was missed was something that Lou and her team, here represented, I think, Max in the room somewhere. Mac? There he is. Brought in their engineers to help look at some of the optimizations that early resolution and our other partner products built on earlier versions of Intel never had actually anticipated to take advantage of. So there were some tweaks to the code. There were some tweaks to the environment settings and other elements that actually helped speed up early resolution by 20%. Now, is everybody going to get that? I don't know, but 20% is quite significant. And then there's a roadmap on top of that for another 20%. These are things that Intel, specifically for Intel chips, laid into play. And that was a very interesting work stream that, I will be honest, I didn't anticipate that significant. I expected 5% here, 10% there. But just the exercise of going back and just cleaning up the software to run better was actually very, very mild. It was more environment settings and maybe one or two little loops, nothing deep surgery, because Intel are experts in their own chips for running under AWS and so on and so forth. The fourth one, of course, was in our internal migration of then shutting down the data center of which it was running on. But those 4 work streams were quite critical to get right. Are we an expert in all of these areas? No. We are experts in actually working with software companies and migrating them. But for migrating our own, we took a really strong position that we were going to embrace the specialities of your two companies to help with that migration. What did it give us? It gave us a fantastic roadmap. It gave us 20% speed improvements, but it also allowed us to actually face off to our customers and show innovation and value for what they pay. Now we actually have better performance. We have a scalable, more scalable product and a more secure product, so we're scale ready. And that is something that all of our customers and our own internal execs have actually said, well done in terms of that move, which was run by Jared's team as a whole. So I'm just highlighting and sort of adding some color on top of this because it's an example of a critical system that needs to be migrated. It's not just taking a new piece of technology, and not to belittle it, but we've got a clean slate with Caspian One. And even then with a Caspian One open data system, it was tricky enough to be able to get all the optimizations in place. So you've got new technology, fantastic technology incidentally, but then you've also got older technology, and the principles apply about taking a big step back and getting the whole ROI and all the moving pieces properly identified to move to the cloud.
Thank you, Hugh. And learning from the early resolution example, we're now going to look at what are the key takeaways for you guys today. From a business standpoint, Lewis, you mentioned earlier new regulation, incentivizing an open banking world. Can you expand more on the business and technical regulation of those new regulations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the US has just, it's a bit loud, isn't it? The US has just clicked the stopwatch, basically, on a major digital transformation. It's coming through. It's called open banking. And now this is a term that people may not be familiar with. It's basically at heart a very simple idea. The customer owns their own data and can digitally share it with whoever they'd like. Now, this is actually a global movement that's been going, first of all, in the UK about 7 years ago. All G7 countries have adopted, the latest being Brazil, and it's coming through into Canada and the US at the moment. It basically means we've got tens of thousands of financial institutions, fintechs, who are about to undertake a major transformation, okay? It's the scale of the transformation is massive, it's significant for each institution, both on a business and a technical perspective. So if we look, first of all, at the business perspective for this, the role of a financial institution will change enormously. So all of a sudden, they're actually going to be using and working now, rather than delivering everything vertically, it's actually working with network organizations, with the fintech community. We now have new distribution channels to the market using the fintech community to white label, cross-sell the core services and the banking models. This is kind of a very intriguing way that banks, financial institutions are now able to reach new demographics. And this kind of simple terms like they talk about embedded finance, where you're actually putting your payments or your FX through into both financial and non-financial applications and actually reaching a completely new client demographic, for example. So this is something that's now kind of starting in the US, and it's building up massive new marketplaces and digital ecosystems, as we're talking about. So if we also look, I think, at what are the types of challenges that the financial institutions are going to face here. The first thing, obviously, is compliance. We have a very aggressive regulatory deadlines. The major banks are in 26, followed by the mid-tiers in 27, then 28, 29 as we get into smaller organizations. But those timelines actually predicate a full front-to-back architectural change. It's all about now sharing customer data securely, okay? So you think on a technical basis now, we've got to put into place a completely external, consent-driven, it's termed, API data sharing. So a customer has to review consent. You need to be able to digitally connect all the fintech communities in digital ecosystems, trust each other, and you've got to implement really high-end security standards. And so some of the new pieces coming into the market is called financial grade API or FAPI. So you all know probably OAuth, et cetera, OIDC maybe. This is another standard that sits above that as well that's being developed on the global markets. Basically, it's underpinned all the security. We also then need to put in place asymmetric encryption, signing, all these kind of, cryptography kind of requirements as well. The actual solution has to be highly, highly scalable. We're talking of millions and billions of API calls every month. And these are also regulated on the latencies, and they've got to be sub few hundred milliseconds basically on response times, and everything has to be a 99.5% response as well on your kind of error rates as well. So the actual bar to hit technically is significant. But also we're thinking back to these financial institutions. So you've got a compliance deadline you've got to meet. You've got a lot of technical challenges just to tick the box. But you've also got to think, how am I going to protect my revenue? So all of a sudden, you've got the fintech communities are in there. They're getting banking as a service. The challenger banks are emerging. All of a sudden, they're eating market share. They're going out. They've got digital online offerings. They're meeting the millennials exactly where they are, digitally first. So you've got this competitive pressure that's building significantly. But also, as an organization, you want to competitively differentiate. Actually, how am I going to push my new offerings to the market? How am I going to attract new customers? What are my revenue generation opportunities here? So again, this is where also the challenge becomes twofold. You've got to invest to obviously meet these compliance states. But if you do so much investment on the commoditized aspects, all of a sudden you're not actually looking at the competitive differentiation. And this kind of is a key bit around the buy versus build strategies you want to put in place. So how does a cloud also fit into this? So my products, I'm launching an open data in Canada with credit unions, card providers, fintechs, and everything as we talk at the moment. And some of the lessons that we've learned both from that and from our global clients, well, first of all, I'll come back to the main point. The cloud is essential to the digital transformation. No country globally has really been able to achieve that with fully on-prem models. Everybody has moved towards cloud solutions. And why is that? What do they do? The first basic points is all around the automation. So you've got the Terraform, cloud formation templates. You're actually building virtual data centers, right? A huge undertaking. And you're able now to automate that fully end-to-end. And in fact, my continuous integration, continuous deployment tools that we're running at the moment means I'm actually standing up significantly complex end-to-end environments with all the databases, APIs, security models, and we're standing them up in about an hour or 2 hours, yeah? And it is that automation and repeatability which is so critical to be able to, to actually start to then build and develop your competitive advantage on top of. But it's that kind of underpinning that the cloud formation approaches, et cetera, all the scripting tools really underpin. Now, the second part is the products. So we use kind of things like DynamoDB, et cetera. And these kind of products on their own, they're very well used. They've gone through multiple tests. They're run in many highly scalable situations. And these kind of products, they're fully fault tolerant. You can auto scale them up and down, really helps you optimize your costs. Building and deploying that level of sophistication on-prem is a multi-year undertaking. Actually, the products are evolving continuously within the market. And also, as we talked about earlier, what are the challenges here? And the momentum quite often gets lost around areas like security, right? There's going to be a lot of challenges. If we look at the kind of the product offerings in the cloud, I can now layer on top these new standards like financial grade API. I can then use all of the detective, the inspector, the AWS Advanced Shield for the DDoS, et cetera. Being able to put all of those together in my security incident processes, I can pull all of these products immediately in with the Terraform, right? And it's about the configuration, my guardrails, et cetera, which means I can have actually patterns that are repeatable. And then what we look at here and the way that we deliver to our own clients from Caspian is we actually provide virtual appliances. And this is where I'm trying to commoditize the cloud. And we actually then put in place all of the scripting that will stand up your ingress architecture, all of the front-end WAFs, the firewalls, your secure key vaults, all the containers to run the API calls, et cetera. And actually then leveraging the tools like Marketplace allows you as an organization to have a buy option. You can start to take down all of these commoditized tools. It basically means, as an organization, you've got that confidence, these patterns are well established, confidence in the cloud native tools allows you to invest your additional funds around how you're going to do the revenue protection and generation. Really understand your customers, how am I actually approaching them, what's going to work. And I think my final point here as well on the being able to leverage everything within the cloud environment is you've got a massive commoditized skill set on the market. You know, the cloud native tools and the scripting, very well understood. Being able to bring somebody in and have that fungibility of your resources between these departments, whereas beforehand you may have organically grown 25-year-old stuff on-prem. That's very hard to bring in skill sets and be able to change your organization, bring in these kind of tools. With the cloud, the standardization, the commoditization, all of a sudden you've got the skill set you can deploy as you need to, with all the contingency resourcing. And so for me, this has been, again, the global lesson. It is a major enabler. There are so many benefits and advantages. And certainly for me, running my entire product cloud native, we're able now to deploy to clients, you know, of various mid-tier sizes, AWS Marketplace. We can actually get some of our clients running, you know, within a few weeks at times in the digital. So these are the key lessons that I've been seeing, basic takeaway.
Thank you, Lewis. Jared, if we go back to the early resolution example, what were the business and technical considerations that you've had that are applicable to the industry?
Yeah, so outside of just the technology itself that provided, you know, digital transformation, AI, machine learning, and data analysis in the lending space, there were some great things that occurred just based upon portability, for example. We've been wanting to go outside of the United States and bring early resolution to financial institutions in Australia and in Europe, and we could not do that without the cloud. We'd have to put servers in those countries. It was very difficult, very challenging, obviously, to install. The cost is very prohibitive. And so AWS allowed us, that migration allowed us to go to those countries now and hopefully bring early resolution to financial institutions there. From a budgeting and procurement perspective, we're able to save a lot of money, specifically around server maintenance. So servers typically have a 5 to 7 year end of life, and it requires millions of dollars to purchase, receive, and install, and it takes at least a year to get a server up and running. And so we don't have to do any of that anymore with AWS. So we're saving a lot of money there, a lot of time. Installation and those types of projects have been completely eliminated through the cloud migration. Another huge cost savings is data centers. So if we have to close a data center or move a data center, obviously we don't have to worry about that anymore with AWS. And so the cost of spinning up a project to do that is eliminated essentially. One of the things that we didn't expect that we would benefit from is we had to spin up a new database, an Oracle database. And typically that would take a lot of time, a lot of effort. We would get sales quotes and we would have to go through the process of getting that approved and obviously budgeted in place. But we just went to the AWS Marketplace and within a day we had a new database. And so that was a great benefit from using the cloud, and we see that as a huge benefit as we talk about scalability, as we talk about, you know, improving and adding new environments to early resolution for new clients. That'll be a huge thing. One of the things too that we learned as well is that you know, with AWS, as I mentioned before, spinning up new environments was very challenging for us. Now with AWS, we can do that very quickly. And so as we moved to the cloud and we did performance testing on the cloud, we spun up a new environment just to test that. So we could do that very quickly. It helped with the cloud migration process. Some of the risks that I talked about that we were trying to remove or mitigate was around our testing processes from a production perspective. And so now we have essentially a parallel test that we could do, which obviously benefits early resolution, but our clients. So there's less risk involved when they process loans through the system. And so, you know, again, performance is a big deal, especially when you're in a regulatory environment and you're trying to process loans quickly through the system. Having that added performance, having the ability to spin up new environments, databases is critical to be able to, again, have scalability, to be able to have portability in the banking space.
Thank you, Jared. Hugh, and I know you feel strongly about AI. So what role does AI play in helping maximize infrastructure modernization?
So I'm going to answer that again from a slightly different tack, right? As we've discussed earlier in the in the session today, we had a few practice sessions, so hence the call. We have to identify what we want to spin up and where and for what reasons, right? Going full back, just taking the old monolith system and shoving it to the cloud actually could be more costly than keeping it on-prem. But we don't want to keep things on-prem, so we have to actually go through those soul-searching operational discussions of what are we going to carve off and what is the target system going to be and what other systems do we drag along with it and put into the cloud. And it's very important to get a sense of what is key for the business that you're making money from before you actually enter into driving all these optimizations, be it cloud, be it federated databases, be it artificial intelligence in any of its forms for speeding up the processes or engaging with your end customers. That actually, ironically, I think is the easy part. We've discussed that at length today. The real issues, I think, are twofold, to answer the sort of question straight on, which is the consultation with the regulator, right? The ethics and the principles of taking a LLM model, or a large language model, sorry, LLM model, and calibrating it in one region in the world to come up with a better heuristic and then taking that and applying that to data, say in the US, could break a few not yet enforced regulations, but might break some ethics in terms of end client data and the analysis. And I think consultation with the regulators is very, very key when we start taking a look at spinning up a new environment, rolling early resolution out to Australia, which is a good thing. But are there any other things that we've forgotten about as we're going on? And I think consultation with the regulators is absolutely key. So identifying what you're doing and why, identifying should you do it and what guardrails come up to it is very easy when we take a look at the trend that all three of my colleagues here on the right have discussed, which is the building blocks of commoditized entities, commoditized modules, commoditized environments. All of that has been proven, it's been locked down, it's been tuned and for execution on Intel chips and so on and so forth. It is, I'm not going to suggest bulletproof, nothing is, but it's a darn sight safer from a building block point of view than we ever had. 10 years ago, I was a CTO at a organization that was a derivatives clearing organization, a clearinghouse ostensibly, that was going to run in both the US and in England. And this is 2014 timeframe. No one was talking about cloud. So we're still 10 years into a massive transformation. There are things that we've forgotten about. And so when we think about AI, which is certainly speeding things up, it's improving our relationships with our customers, it's identifying patterns, it's driving documentation like never before in a good way so that we're removing manual processes. Brilliant. But what are we forgetting is a question to the question, right? And that'll lead to our last question.
Yeah, so I mean, clearly the sense of urgency is coming from every direction here. So how do you get started with what feels like a mammoth task? And especially as some customers are very mature in their cloud journey, others are just starting. So Cherith, what would you say should be the first action to take?
So I think, when you think about the first action to take, and I think a lot of my panelists say the same thing here, it's the immutable need. Now, the immutable need may be, I need to exit a data center. The immutable need often is, I need to deliver better customer experience. The immutable need could be, I want to be able to drive global expansion. So when you focus on the immutable need, it actually will help you focus where to start and derive business value early in terms of what you do on the cloud. If you look at it as a technology project as opposed to a business project, that's where we see value eroded because you're doing something for technology's sake. Same thing applies with generative AI. Generative AI is a tool, the cloud is a tool to get to an end business purpose. So what I see for those organizations that are well on their migration and modernization journey using AWS, they've really indexed on one or two immutable needs to start, whether that's customer experience, TCO, etc., and then continue to iterate quickly and experiment and iterate and experiment, knowing that, as you said, We are now into the second decade as AWS, helping financial services customers modernize their capabilities in the cloud, but it's still a journey, yeah? We've got many, many customers that are still on premises, some that are in hybrid state and some that are all in. And as you go through that iteration, when you focus on those immutable needs, you'll actually start to derive value faster, and then you'll get your business aligned, and then you'll get that flywheel of action rotating so that you're actually delivering value to your end stakeholders, your customers, etc. So that's kind of where I would start. So really focus on the immutable need, index on that, and that's where you get started.
Thank you. Lewis?
Yeah, so as we kind of mentioned earlier, cloud, as I think is very clearly, it's a critical foundation and enabler for digital strategies going forward. It is the key premise, really. For me, again, when you need to start these strategies, what's critical is to embed organizational learning as quickly as possible. You need to understand your strategies, what's working for your organization, what your own view of this needs to be. And I think as you start to look at the regulatory deadlines that are coming through, for you as FIs, et cetera, in the room potentially, you're thinking, well, I've only got a couple of years and I've got a major new regulation that affects my entire architecture I've got to get live. Yeah, it's a substantial change. It's multi-million pounds globally have been spent by every organization to do this. And therefore, how do I ensure I start to iterate, as Chad was saying, before you get to the really risky items? And you want to ensure that you've got a real core of excellence within your business that really understands this, really understands your architectural approaches. But you need to start now, and I would suggest really embedding that as quickly as possible, really getting that organizational learning in as soon as possible.
Yeah, I agree with what Cherith was saying around having a purpose. For example, with early resolution, it was the customer experience. We needed to have that customer experience that was streamlined, that was efficient, that allowed customers and borrowers to get into modifications quickly in an automated fashion, and doing it with scalability, and to be able to do a large number at one time. And so that was the driving force for us. But I think as we took on the effort of trying to migrate to the cloud, we understood that it was going to be a long process. It wasn't going to be easy. But a couple of things that we did, I think, that were very important. We defined what our security framework was very early on. That was critical. And I highly recommend that you do that, because if you establish that early, it makes the implementation much easier as you go along. You'll have issues if you don't. It really does drive your decisions and prevent a lot of different issues that may come up during the process of migrating to the cloud. One of the key benefits that we did not know about when we first started was the support that we would get from AWS. They provided a lot of support, a lot of training. There were a number of programs that they provide us to upskill our employees, and they were excited because they were going to learn new technologies, which was important. AI, cloud, those are obviously terms in the industry that are important, and so your employees will get on board and they'll want to learn those different aspects of the new technology. A couple of things that I thought was important is that with the support that they had, the collaboration was critical, the ongoing collaboration. It wasn't just that they provided training and support, but they were collaborating with us on a constant basis throughout the entire process, meaning that they were monitoring our progress. They were engaged, and they were helping us get across the finish line, which was critical. It wasn't just we were doing the cloud migration on our own. They were helping. They were leading the effort. They were helping us get there to meet our goals. And then the last thing I think was critical to not impact fully our clients was to be able to maintain a normal release schedule when we had to make code changes to be able to migrate to the cloud. For example, moving from DB2 to Postgres, that was critical. And so we needed to minimize the impacts to our clients as we did that. And so maintaining a normal release schedule while doing that really helped, because if you have maintenance windows that continually come up, it really affects your clients, and actually sometimes can slow down the process, because if there's issues that are brought up by them and are not handled within the normal release cycle, it can be challenging and problematic. So that was a key effort as well. But overall, I think it's great. It's been wonderful, and obviously the new technology really has provided a lift for the system itself. So.
Thank you. Hugh, can I ask you to be short and sweet, because we have 5 minutes left?
Okay. Right, so 6 points, 3 sub-points each. No. First off, on behalf of my fellows here on the right, collectively, I think the word digital gets overused as a panacea for, aspirin. Oh, we'll come up with a digital strategy and we'll digitize it and we'll all be sorted, right? So I think it's important to sort of remove the vernacular and get down to some fundamentals, which the team here has already highlighted. Just as a way of summary, having a layered roadmap of the ecosystem of all applications. I'm not just moving this system over, I might be moving other systems. I might actually be saying, you're done, and throw out and replace. Or I might have you and actually sort of move you forward with some other pieces. Having a good roadmap for what your plan is absolutely key. And that's a much higher level program kind of level sort of item rather than the lessons learned from my colleagues here in the trenches. But having a comprehensive view of all the ROI, return on investment items is key because you're going to have to dynamically make some decisions. We needed a Oracle database. We just grabbed one. Thankfully, that was a low-cost affair. But then there's other decisions that have to be made along the way. And if you know what those trade-offs are and you know what your equation for the ROI is, so what if there's more cost? So long as you can see it's going to pay off later on. And that's key. And a lot of people stop or they get nervous. When we take a look at the resources, we touched on this. You've got your SMEs in your organization who might be feeling under threat from change, but once the change has happened, it'll all balance out and everybody goes back to their day jobs. So having an understanding of the resources and what you need to rely on partners for is absolutely key. Which actually just drives to that last point, which is embrace partners. That's what they're there for. They'll take the risks. They know what they're doing. They'll, in the case of AWS and inadvertently Intel, will see recurring revenue come, but they're there to actually work with you to help take the risks, as seen by both these individuals in completely different use cases. We migrated Caspian One to the cloud once they had built their virtual appliance and sort of moved it in. He speaks highly of that. And the same thing with Jared with regards to early resolution. Two interesting examples of what is a critical system and what will very quickly become a critical system. So partners. Yep.
Thank you. So if I could give a brief summary, it's clear that the modernization need is undeniable. Technology is key, and cloud is an enabler. We looked at the increased technical debt, at the increasing customer expectations, at the increasing need for higher level of security. We looked at new regulations, making cloud the best option to obtain additional capacity whenever it's needed and for however long it's needed. But also, the risk of being leapfrogged by other companies that were born in the cloud. So how do we go about it? From what I've heard, I've captured 3 main points. First and foremost, it's absolutely critical to have this change of mindset from top to bottom, so to have a cloud-first strategy commitment from a CIO level, or from C-level, but also bottom-up. You need to get your workforce retrained. You need to get your workforce on board. Point number 2, we cannot get started without a clear business case. And everyone is bought on, the cloud is great and I can be faster and more performant, but there is a bit of a paralysis. Where do I start? That brings us to the business and really building up the why in terms of ROI justification. Point number 3, last but not least, and probably the key takeaway here today is you're not alone. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just leverage the ecosystem of partners. Intel and AWS have designed programs to help you migrate and modernize those mission-critical applications. And that goes from financial incentive to free technical support to help tweak and optimize those applications further. And we'll meet you wherever you're at in your migration journey. So I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all of the insights that you shared with us today. I wish everyone a fun week and get your steps in. Thank you very much, everyone.
And thank you.